Hello everybody and welcome back to part 2 of our small block Chevy 350 refresh on a budget. In this episode we are going to do the top end, and I'm going to show you the world's easiest way to do lifter lash and not even forget where you're at if you have to walk away, step away from the engine and come back. I don't know, maybe you got kids. Things happen, you get a phone call. I'm going to show you that. Welcome back to Tree Road Rescue. Now, one thing that I want to talk about that gets overlooked a lot of the time whenever people are building any kind of engine is a head gasket. If you're building for power, hang on, we got wind. Let me just lower that. If you're going for power and compression, you want to put your head on here, get some clearance putty, turn your motor over, see how much clearance you got, and then get you a head gasket according, because the closer the gap you get from the piston and the firing ring from the head, the more compression you're going to have, obviously. With this being a stock build, going back to OEM, basically just a refresh, went with the standard Velcro head gasket. It's going to be at stock clearance, whatever that is. I haven't measured, and I'm not going to because we're doing stock. So if you're building for power, keep that in mind. Hey, how much distance do I have from the top of the piston to my head? How much closer can I get my cylinder head to the decking of the block without damaging anything? That's going to raise your compression ratio immediately. So by how much? That I don't know. I don't know. Depends on your engine, depends on your pistons, depends on your heads, depends on a lot of things. Anyway, carrying on. We wanted to go back with the factory color that came on this engine, and that is corporate blue. I don't know, I can't remember if I said that last episode or not. But anyway, we got our lifters in, we got our cam in, we got our whole rotating assembly in. Now, it is time to do the heads. Now, whenever doing your cylinder heads, first and foremost, make sure that they're clean. Line your dowels up. Ease it forward a little. And don't drop it. Get it on there. Give it a little love tap. Seat it. Make sure that your gasket is where it needs to be. Bada bing, bada boom. There it is. Yep, that's what we're looking for. Now, heads do have a torque sequence. I believe, I'd have to look, I think it's 90 foot-pounds. Maybe it's 80. I'll verify for you. But there is a torque sequence. And there's a whole diagram of arrows and numbers. Easiest way to remember, okay? And you can get your diagram and test this. This is for small block Chevy. GM, basically, V8. You can get your diagram, follow along with me if you want. You start in the center, small circles to big circles. So you go, if your rockers are out of your way, you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth. Small circles to big circles. And that is the torque sequence, and you want to do it in 3 increments. Basically the same as everything else. So, with that being said, let me get my hardware. And the hardware that we're using, where'd my box go? I'm all of a sudden unorganized. Where did box? Where did you go? That's a valid question. Where did I put my hardware? Found it. I put it over there on my rolly cart. of parts that go onto here. Engine tech, factory style head bolts, no ARPs. We're going stock. We don't necessarily need ARPs. We don't need to worry about how strong the hold is because of our compression ratio or how much boost we're adding to it or cylinder pressure. You ain't got to worry about none of that. It's stock. What was it, 200 horsepower? Somewhere in that. Now, some of these are going into water passages. Safe bet for me is I put RTV on every single bolt, except for the ones down here. Not quite necessary, but I do it anyway. Anyway, so I'm going to lather them all up in right stuff. It is a RTV, room temperature vulcanization cream. Head gasket maker. Or gasket, whatever. Now, I don't cut the cap, because I use that to seal it up. Chings. Open it up. Grab your bolts. And then just a dabble do ya. Put it on your bolt, put it in, and run it down finger tight. Then you'll come through here and then you'll torque them all out for spec. And there are different size bolts for different holes. So you want to get out all of your hardware and determine on what goes where. All of your shorties are going to go to the outside. Okay? All your mid-rollers are going to be all the way around the sides. Your long boys are going to go in the 3 slots, 3 to 5 slots, up top here in the middle. And you can test this by dropping them in and seeing how far off the head is sticking, the head of the bolt, off of your head itself. Like, see, that one's sticking up a couple of inches. That's obviously not where that goes. Your mid-rollers go there. Ching. Then once you've established where all your head bolts go, do like I just said. Put your RTV on them. Doesn't need to be a whole bunch. I usually go around the first few threads, drop it in, and that will seal it just fine. RTV, put it down on the top, and just roll it around. It's really all you need. Maybe a little bit more than that if you don't feel as confident about it. It's all you need. Remember, the more you put on here, the more mess you're going to make. And if you just freshly painted an engine, let's just not make it a mess, huh? Now, the torque specification for this small block 350 is 65 foot-pounds. So we're going to go in 3 increments, 30, 50, and 65. Starting with the center bolt. I got my torque wrench set to 30 foot-pounds. And I have them kind of ran down a little bit. That way I don't have to sit here for 4 days turning each one of these down. So, here we go. Got some resistance, 30 foot-pounds. There it is. You can't really hear it because it's super light. Now, the next bolt over. There we go. Remember, small circle to big circle. To 50. Save and sequence. There's 50. Lock it in. 50. Got me down here. 50. 50. I always like to come back and double check absolutely everything as I do it. Like I'll go through each and every one of these and hit them linear. That way I know I got them all there. 30, not as crucial. Once you start getting to 50 and 65, you want to make certain that they're all there. And I don't know if you can hear my ratchet clicking or not. Old school, man. I ain't got one of those digital things. That one had a little bit more to it. Now, 65 pounds. So we're at 60 and then 0.5. Same thing. It's real scary, let me tell you. Now we're torqued down. Now I'll just go back through and just check real quick. Yep. Yep. So on and so forth. And then I'll rinse and repeat for the other side. Good deal. Now for the other side. I won't bore you with it. Now, all right, now it's time for some push rods. Now, with this being a factory rebuild, basically, I don't really have to worry about rocker arm geometry, push rod length, or anything like that. There's plenty of tools to get your proper geometry. And if you need a really good video on how to do that, highly recommend going over to Vice Grip Garage in one of his playlists, engine builds. I think it's part 2 of the big block budget build. Fantastic explanation on how to get proper rocker arm geometry. Breaks down the science and the mathematics. So, but here we don't have to worry about it. And you ain't got to worry about it if you're just doing a very stock build. If it's the way that GM intended it to come out of the showroom floor, you ain't got to worry about it. Always soak everything in engine oil, like your lifters, your push rods, and everything like that. That way they're kind of pre-oiled and they have some kind of a cushion over them as you drop them in. You can do all of these at the exact same time. It's very, very good habit to keep all of these mated together. So your number 1 intake push rod should be connected to your number 1 intake lifter and your rocker. I have these in order, so I ain't got to worry about none of that. But if you're using some of the same parts, be sure to stamp them, tag them in some way where you know what is going on. All right, now it's time for some push rods. Now, with this being a factory rebuild, basically, I don't really have to worry about rocker arm geometry, push rod length, or anything like that. There's plenty of tools to get your proper geometry. And if you need a really good video on how to do that, highly recommend going over to Vice Grip Garage in one of his playlists, engine builds. I think it's part 2 of the big block budget build. Fantastic explanation on how to get proper rocker arm geometry. Breaks down the science and the mathematics. So, but here we don't have to worry about it. And you ain't got to worry about it if you're just doing a very stock build. If it's the way that GM intended it to come out of the showroom floor, you ain't got to worry about it. Always soak everything in engine oil, like your lifters, your push rods, and everything like that. That way they're kind of pre-oiled, and they have some kind of a cushion all over them as you drop them in. You can do all of these at the exact same time. It's very good habit to keep all of these mated together. So your number one intake push rod should be connected to your number one intake lifter and your rocker. I have these in order, so I ain't got to worry about none of that. But if you're using some of the same parts, be sure to stamp them, tag them in some way where you know what is going on. Okay, now I'm going to show you the world's easiest way to do lifter lash on your engine build without having to go through all the science and the math and position and everything like that. Basically, what you do is you get everything kind of snug to where you have zero lash. This is lash, right? The rocker can come right off and just cause all kinds of damage, right? And at this point, that's almost zero lash. That's at zero lash. See that? This push rod isn't pushing on this one here. That's technically zero lash without preload. Now, you just put your heads on, you just put your push rods and your lifters in and your rocker arms on. Now you're ready to do lifter lash. So what you do, and I left this one loose, the rest of them are already kind of snug, but you'll run your nut down. You don't have to count your threads if you're doing like a stock set of heads or something like that. So you get it to where it's basically at zero, just like that. Give the rocker a good wiggle. No up and down movement, kind of give it to where you have no up and down and a little bit of resistance, right? This is where it starts to get a little tedious. And then you go through each and every one of them. Get them to zero lash. No up and down movement. With just a little bit of resistance. At this point, it doesn't matter where the nut is at on your stud. You're going to go through each one of these, get a zero lash with a little bit of resistance. If you lock up the push rod, back it off until you can spin it. See that? Now I'm able to spin that. Just snug it up. Okay, and you go through the whole thing. Right? Now once we've done them all, we'll rotate the engine 1/4 of a turn. And you do this through 2 full rotations at the crank. And then, by the time that you're done, you will be at zero lash. Now you just got to do your 1/4 or a half turn of preload. Whatever suits you, whatever floats your boat. I usually start with a half turn preload, and then if I hear anything or if it's getting a little crazy, I can always pull the valve covers off and get it another 1/4 of a turn. Did I say I prefer a 1/4 of a turn, not a half turn? But I'll start at a half turn, fire it up, see how I like it. If I don't like it, I can always remove the valve cover and give it another 1/4 of a turn, and it won't harm anything. I'd rather be too loose than too tight. Remember, give your rockers a little rock, because that washer that's down in there is tapered. You want to make sure that washer is centered and not holding you up. So right now these are at zero lash at this point in time. What I'm going to do now, you might notice that the timing cover's off. I had an issue with the timing cover, so I got a weld on it. So I just temporarily have the harmonic balancer on. So I'm going to rotate this engine 1/4 of a turn. All of those moved, right? So now we're going to go back through. This one's back with lash. This one's not. This one's not. That one has a little. That one's not. That one has a lot. And we're just going to do this and continue to do this process for 2 full rotations. And by the end of that second rotation, all of these will be set to zero lash and you can do your preload. I'll bring you back for that. All right, so I am at 2 full rotations and I have zero lash, and now is a really good time to pay attention to the threads that are on your rocker studs. Okay? If you have one that is much longer than the other, or more threads sticking through than the other, chances are that stud is pulling out of the head, which would mean you'd need to go get that fixed. Get another press in or screw in rocker arm studs. This engine though, all of them look to be exactly the same. This is very, very good news. Makes life a lot easier on us. So we are at 0 lash, no up and down movement, and a little bit of resistance on the push rods, on those that are not already triggering the valve by the lifter being engaged. So we are in good shape. Now it's time to preload it. Very simple. Let me come over here where you can see better. Or let me move you to where you can see better. Okay, so there's our engine. It's very simple. I start at the top. I do 1/4 of a turn. A lot of folks do have turns, but I always do 1/4 of a turn. Like I said before, I'd rather be loose by a certain extent or a certain degree than be really over tightened. So there's my preload. And then I'll come over here. I'll do the same thing. 1/4 of a turn on every one of them. And if I have to, I can always remove the valve cover and go 1 extra 1/4 of a turn. Okay, now it's time for the Enzo tick. Your intake gaskets, a lot of times, will say, does this one say it? Yeah, this side up, even though it's going to be upside down. That just indicates that you get it at the right spot. So I just do a few dabs, nothing too crazy, just to hold the intake gasket in place. And then I dabble do right there in the corner, about a 1/4 inch. And the same over here. Get rid of those rubber things that they send you on the walls here. They do nothing but cause problems. Now you just kind of line it up and press. That way it'll stay put while you're doing your intake. And do the same thing over here. Do a few little dabble-doos. Okay, kind of thick at the corner there, because you don't want any leaks, and that's where it's going to leak. Okay. And take your gasket, you place it, bada bing. Then you're ready for your Enzo take. Just sit there and marinate for a minute. There we go. Sweet. Now, 1/4 inch bead all the way across. What you want. Because if you don't, you're going to have leaks. And we don't want leaks. Front and rear. Make sure you cap off, because this stuff's expensive. Now you let that sit there for a second. This is where you want to be gentle. You want to make sure that you get a little squish out of your RTV. Because if you don't, you're going to have leaks. and then let it sit there. Let it sit there and marinate for a minute or two. And then grab your bolts and run them in. Looks a little different now, don't it? Yeah. But, I mean, essentially, this about does it for our small block stock Chevy 350 rebuild. We got about $1,000 invested in it. Now, mind you, that is going to the machine shop, having it dipped, having it cleaned, having it crank forged, new pistons, new rods, new bearings, new cam bearings, and the whole 9 yards. So that's everything invested, right about $1,000, as long as I don't pay myself. And it's actually turned out really good. These are the original valve covers that came on the car whenever it showed up. Was it the original Corvette? I don't seem to think so, but I could be wrong. Comment below if I'm wrong, if these were original or not. But I shined them up a little bit, best I can, with considering the age. Now, we're not done with this. Obviously, I still have to put on the water pump and everything like that, but if you disassembled it, it goes back exactly the same way. Pictures. You ain't going to remember how all these brackets and everything came about. Anyway, we have a few more things to do to this. You want to see it run, of course. You're going to have to tune in next time for that, though, because we got to drop this into the car. 1980 C3 Corvette. Got the car. It was knocking like the police at your front door with a warrant. Okay? Wasn't good. Wasn't good at all. Totally destroyed. So now we're going to see if it runs. So tune in next time right here to Tree Row Rescue. You know I appreciate you. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all the things. And again, thanks for hanging out with me. See ya.